everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome to The Good Trouble Show. Does anyone remember this story on 60 Minutes not too long ago? So for decades, the Pentagon publicly stated that it was not studying UFOs. UFOs were literally nothing but swamp gas. This Pentagon house of cards came crashing down in December 2017 when Lue Elizondo quit the Pentagon in protest and went public in the New York Times bombshell story, quote, "Glowing Auras and Black Programs, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program." This was literally one of their probably one of their biggest stories. Now, the New York Times story got the attention of lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Before they knew it, pilots and other military members began showing up at their offices to share their experiences encountering UFOs, now known, of course, as UAPs or unidentified anomalous phenomena, and the retaliation they were receiving from the Pentagon for even reporting the incidents up the chain of command. Now, in reaction, Senators Kirsten Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, and others passed legislation forcing the Pentagon to report to Congress on UAPs and passing laws as well to protect UAP whistleblowers. The New York Times article and the resulting congressional action absolutely enraged the Pentagon, as Lue Elizondo exposed that they've been lying all along, not only to the American public, but also to members of Congress. Now, while initially confirming Lue's involvement in AATIP, the Pentagon quickly changed its tune. Led by Pentagon Public Affairs Officer Susan Goff, the Pentagon, in coordination with the Central Intelligence Agency, denied that AATIP even existed and used journalists and Twitter bloggers to spread conspiracy theories, all to undermine Lue Elizondo's credibility. The Pentagon's goal was absolutely clear. If they could erase any records of AATIP and Lue Elizondo, Congress and the American public would conclude Lue was a fraud, and the Pentagon could, just put the UFO toothpaste back in the tube. Now, Lue Elizondo provided some exclusive statements to the Good Trouble Show. Quote, "When people first inquired about my story, the Pentagon initially confirmed my role in AATIP and the focus of its efforts. Shortly after Secretary Mattis left the department, the Pentagon changed its tune by saying all my emails had been deleted, the same emails that would substantiate not only my claims, but many of those who were part of the AATIP effort, including one of its sponsors, the great late Harry Reid." Now, keep in mind, as part of this legal case, United States versus Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al., there is a court preservation order that is still in effect that requires the retention of literally all of Lue Elizondo's emails in perpetuity because of Lue's involvement in the 9/11 Commission's trial for the accused perpetrators of the attacks on 9/11. Now, all of this came back to the forefront with the release of this story by John Greenwald Jr. of the Black Vault. Quote, "New FOIA release highlights redactions in key AATIP correspondence. What is the Pentagon hiding?" It's a pretty damn good question. Now, while I have been critical of some of John's analysis, he actually has done excellent work utilizing the Freedom of Information Act. I've included a link to John's article in the YouTube description, and of course I encourage everyone here watching to read it. Now, through a FOIA request John filed in 2021, he finally received an email chain from the Pentagon regarding Lue Elizondo, AATIP, and Lue Elizondo's replacement at AATIP, Neil Tipton. Lue, once again, in an exclusive statement provided to the Good Trouble Show, continued, later, when confronted with a FOIA request, the Pentagon denied again the existence of any emails or correspondence between me and other seniors within the department who I was regularly engaged with until the day I left the Pentagon in 2017. Recently, one of my emails was leaked by an unknown person on Reddit. Now, this time when the Pentagon was challenged with the existence of the email, in this case, one that described the authorized transfer of AATIP leadership responsibilities to another senior member of the department and endorsed by the Secretary of Defense front office, they were forced to admit this email existed, was not deleted as they had previously claimed. Now, begrudgingly, the Pentagon finally did release the email, proving my role and participation in AATIP. The Pentagon decided to redact the mention of AATIP. Big surprise there. By this logic, they would also have to redact the name of AARO and any other office at the Pentagon. Yeah, well, big surprise there. Now, Greenwald, in his article in the Black Vault, shows the two emails. We'll show them here. And, if you look at it, I mean, this is incredibly damning. It truly demonstrates that the Pentagon continues to break federal law. And, when you look at these two things, what it does is it really lays bare the fact that Lue Elizondo's emails have not been deleted, despite what, the Pentagon wants you to think. Now, the Pentagon continues to lie to Congress, and we know a lot of members of Congress and their staffers watch this show, and I want you guys to really pay attention to this. They're lying to you and the public about all of this. Remember, a standing federal court order, as I mentioned, requires the Pentagon to keep all, not just any, all of Lue Elizondo's emails on file in perpetuity. I mentioned earlier that Pentagon Public Affairs Officer Susan Goff has been, well, let's just say, a staple at the Pentagon Public Affairs Office. And a lot of people wonder, who is Susan Goff? Well, she lists on her LinkedIn profile that she's a senior strategic planner and spokesperson at the Pentagon. She's not just a talking head. Before that, she was on the defense contractor Booz Allen Hamilton's strategic communications team. And, well, before that, she was a colonel in the United States Army. Guess what she was specializing in? Psychological operations. That's right. No big surprise there. Her thesis was on psychological operations, and that is not really a surprise. Lue Elizondo continued to note to the Good Trouble Show, it should also be noted that the Pentagon's mouthpiece for this one individual, Susan Goff, who he's alluding to here, within the Public Affairs Office, who has been given sole authority to handle all, absolutely all, FOIA requests involving UAPs, AARO, AATIP, and specifically me being Lue Elizondo. All this information is in the public sphere and can be easily verified thanks to the works of certain private citizens fighting for increased government transparency through the FOIA process. Simply put, you and Congress continued to be lied to by a few at the Pentagon who prefer to view you and the American people as sheeple. Make no mistake, the Pentagon Public Affairs Office has a long history of feeding misinformation to certain questionable journalists to mislead the American public, and that relationship is alive and well today and is in fact now legal through a new and disturbing policy of perception management. Now, information and perception management is it's really just kind of a fancy word for propaganda or psychological operations. In fact, the Pentagon's UFO UAP program, AARO, which was run by former director Sean Kirkpatrick, spent well over $1.9 million per year on information and perception management contractor Sancor. Now, we have stated time and time again on this show that the Pentagon, in coordination with the CIA, and I want to remind everybody, the CIA has been the portfolio holder of the UAP, UFO, crash retrieval and back engineering program. They are the ones that own this thing. And they have been conducting, along with the Pentagon, a covert mass psychological operation against the American public and you, members of Congress, regarding the UAP issue. And this is in direct violation of Presidential Executive Order 12333. Now, We have also stated that for literally decades, the Pentagon and the CIA have utilized harassment, intimidation, illegal surveillance, and even wet works, which is the CIA's term for targeted assassinations, to silence or discourage any government whistleblowers involved in the decades-old UFO crash recovery and back engineering program. So this final statement from Lue Elizondo is absolutely the most disturbing thing. Quote, to add insult to injury, I was notified yesterday that there may be a personal threat against myself and several other whistleblowers formerly associated with the UAP effort for the U.S. government. As such, I would like to make this perfectly clear to the American people. I am not prone to accidents. I'm not suicidal. I'm not abusing drugs. I am not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members, in the future, you will know what happened. You will know what happened. I want everybody to just stop and think for a moment about that statement from Lue Elizondo. I mean, this is coming from a former high-ranking and decorated member of the intelligence community, a guy much like David Grusch and others that have literally sacrificed everything for this country. People like Lue Elizondo and David Grusch that have in many ways thrown away their career, thrown away literally everything to put country before themselves, country in many ways before their families. For Lue Elizondo and others, which I think we'll probably hear this from other people, to have to tell the public that, hey, if anything happens to me that might look like a suicide or an accident, that, you know what, it wasn't an accident. How enraging, how absolutely maddening that we have a Pentagon and the CIA that, many of us thought all of these sort of dirty tricks and things that they have done in the past would stop. And no, it continues. It is absolutely un-American. Congress, you should be absolutely outraged. How incredibly sad Lue Elizondo must make that kind of statement in case something that might look like an accident happens to him. I mean, it's almost impossible to comprehend. So members of Congress, you took the following oath. Quote, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. Members of Congress, you have before you a Pentagon and an intelligence community, the CIA, whose continued illegal covert actions targeting Americans not only fly in the face of congressional oversight, it flies in the face of the Constitution and everything the United States of America stands for. These folks have done everything for this country. These folks recognize that there is something absolutely corrupt and rotten going on in the Pentagon and the CIA. Lue Elizondo and David Grusch and others, they put themselves and their families at risk with this kind of bullshit. Congress, members of Congress, it is time for congressional hearings, full stop. All right, joining us today for commentary is and analysis. It's author, researcher, investigative reporter, and host of Reality Check on News Nation. Everyone, please welcome Ross Coulthart. Ross, how are you, sir?
G'day, Matt. How are you? I'm shocked by what Lue and you have revealed today. That is That is quite something.
It is quite something. And, what is your reaction to all of this?
Okay, it's very hard to overstate the implications of what Lue has told you today. I've known about some of what Lue's talked about there for some time. I'm amazed he's gone public with it, and I'm very happy to see he's finally done this because, frankly, I think a lot of this needs to be brought out into the open because a lot of whistleblowers are being intimidated, threatened, and possibly worse. Now, what we're looking at here is, as you've pointed out, a clear breach of Executive Order 12333. That's a presidential executive order. The president has the right under the Constitution to issue executive orders, and they did that back in the Reagan era. There was a response to the illegalities that have been revealed both during Watergate and Iran-Contra, and they basically made a law which said there will not be any perception or operations, any deception, propaganda operations run against the American public. That is illegal. All's fair in love and war against your foreign adversaries. You can run deception operations against potential foreign adversaries as much as you like. But the lesson of Watergate that we were going through, I remind the viewers, 50 years ago today, the lessons of Watergate are you do not let an executive or indeed any arm of government run out of control to the extent that it's breaching the Constitution. Executive Order 12333 is the first pillar, but there's another pillar, Matt, that matters here. Because you pointed out a document there which talks about the KSM case, the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed case, which is a case I know really well. One of the reasons I know who Lue Elizondo is and why he's such a pillar of the US intelligence establishment is because of I know the work that he did in the KSM, the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed case. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is one of the bad guys that's locked up in Guantanamo. He's currently facing criminal charges under military law. He's being tried by a military tribunal in Guantanamo. The document you put up on screen, I think it was dated, correct me if I'm wrong, 2016.
I think
now,
so,
that's
yes.
important. That's 1 year before Lue went public, okay? Now, in law, I'm an attorney by training. In law, the orders that were made by the court would have been made very, very early on in those hearings. So that case was filed in 2016. Let's assume that the order that the court made that required the retention of Lue Elizondo's emails was made in 2016 or perhaps early 2017. That means that any officer, any enlisted person in the United States Department of Defense was under military order to heed the order of the court. Now, why does that matter? Now, I don't break court orders at all. You know, as a journalist, but also as somebody who was trained as an attorney, I've learned you heed court orders. But when you're dealing with military law, this is when this really matters. Because in military order, insubordination, the defiance of a legitimate order of a military court is a grave military offence, punishable by up to 5 years in jail, a dishonourable discharge, and forfeiture of all pay and allowances. This is an offence, a military offence under military law. If what you're saying is true, if it's true that the Pentagon is hiding, concealing emails that it has previously said publicly in a response to a lawful FOI complaint are destroyed and do not exist, if they've told a court that those emails have been destroyed in defiance of a court order, however way you look at this, this is an insubordination offence under military law. It is a defiance of an order. In war, whoever did that would be put up against a wall and shot. I kid you not. This is one of the gravest offences in military law. What we're looking at here is prima facie evidence that suggests that the Pentagon has committed a grave criminal offence, that individuals in the Department of Defence have committed offences that are offences of insubordination, defiance of military law, defiance of the orders of a serious high-level court. Now, I don't know what it takes to get the Congress upset about what's going on, but I think we've finally crossed a line here, Matt. This is fucking incredible.
Yeah, no, it's really...
I just can't believe that they've done this.
It's insane. If you don't mind, just kind of take a slight step to your left so I can get you a little centered up there.
Sure, no worries.
Yeah, all right. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it is just absolutely mind-blowing, that this has gone on for so long. It is literally as if the Pentagon and the CIA is giving the middle finger to Congress and saying, you know what, all of you guys, you're nothing but temporary employees. You do not deserve to know what is going on. And it's funny
you use that term, temporary employee, but I can tell you I've heard that term from people in the Defence Department.
Really?
Who, when I've said why is the president not briefed in to what you're supposedly aware of, the program, the illegal crash retrieval reverse engineering program, right, they arrogantly, with hubris, dismissed the notion of the president or Congress being briefed in because they're temporary employees. This really is the way these guys think. I find it breathtaking.
It's breathtaking, and it's also it's just absolutely perverse. It's a perverse view of their role in this country. It's a perverse, perverted view of the Constitution. It's a perverse view of congressional oversight. This is, even, in many ways, I don't know what's worse. The possibility, which I believe is true, that we are being interacted with by non-human intelligence, that we have no idea what they are up to, or the fact that you have the Pentagon and the CIA harassing people, surveilling people, and and possibly threatening their lives and their families. I cannot think of another reason why Congress should not haul the Secretary of Defense, the ODNI Director, Avril Haines, and the CIA Director in front of Congress. Put them under oath and demand to know what the hell is going on and why you guys think that we should just be blown off and ignored. I'm almost speechless. This is so enraging.
Well, I think what we're looking at here are clear illegalities. Let's just make it very clear, because our audience might have some difficulty understanding why this matters. Okay, we have a court order saying, do not destroy any of Lue Elizondo's emails. That's a court order from the KSM court case under military law in Guantanamo. That's an order that if you breach it, it's a military insubordination of offence punishable by jail, dishonourable discharge. You also have Executive Order 12333, which says you cannot mislead the public. You cannot lie to the American public and run deception operations, propaganda operations against American citizens. We know that the Pentagon has denied, under an FOI request, the existence of any email or correspondence between Lue Elizondo and any other seniors within the department. Yet Lue has revealed that one of his emails was leaked by someone unknown on Reddit. And this time, when the Pentagon was challenged, they were forced to admit this email existed and had not been deleted. That's a lie. I mean, has that been disclosed to the military court? There are so many angles here that are worthy of further investigation. Has the court been told the same thing? I mean, what I find breathtaking here is you have caught the Pentagon cold, flat out lying.
Flat out.
And what I find often amazing in America is people often go, oh yeah, Pentagon lies all the time, who cares? You're just working yourself up into a lather about this. Seriously, what's mattering about this one is this is where a court order is being willfully breached in an act of insubordination. This is where they've crossed the line, because they've told a court that they will retain these emails. They've issued public comments saying that they don't have these emails. So on their face, they've committed an offence. Unless we're meant to assume that even before the court hearing happened, they'd destroyed Lue's emails, which can't possibly be true, because Lue didn't leave the Pentagon until 2017, about a month before he appeared publicly, speaking for, I think at the time, when did he appear on To the Stars? Was it 2017 or? No, it was 2016.
Yeah, I'm not
No, I think
quite
it was
sure.
the year prior.
Right.
But I've had a quick chat with Lue today, and I asked him, is there any possibility of wriggle room here? Is there any possible explanation that the Pentagon could say that this was just an inadvertent mistake? One thing I'm mindful of in my line of work is we always use the term, always assume a screw up before a conspiracy. I would use the real term we use, but my wife constantly accuses me of swearing on camera, so I won't use the real term. Right. But, always assume a screw up before a conspiracy. Give people the benefit of the doubt, particularly bureaucratic institutions. They do, they screw up. In this case, from what I'm hearing from Lue and seeing on the paperwork you've published today, it's very hard to see how there could be an out for whoever made this decision to lie both to Congress and to the general public. That is an act of willful deception.
Right.
That is not only a breach of Executive Order 12333, it's an act of military insubordination punishable by imprisonment. We are now moving into very grave territory, Matt. And the interesting thing is, as you and I both know, there are an enormous number of people behind the scenes who are talking to people like yourself and myself. We know a great deal more than we're letting on. And what we're doing is we're just slowly allowing the Pentagon to dig itself into a hole. We've seen in the last few weeks what the AARO historical report was shown to be. The report by the Pentagon's UFO investigation team has just been derisively mocked roundly across the country because it was shown up to be the complete whitewash con job on the American public and the rest of the world that it really was. And the lies within that report have slowly been pulled out and extracted and shown to be willfully misleading. The same thing's happening again. At what point do we stop and go, come on, guys, this is ridiculous?
Yeah, and the thing you have to wonder is how stupid does the Pentagon and the CIA think we all are? It's as you pointed out, the AARO historical report, which was likely written during Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's tenure at AARO. I mean, my cat could have written a better report than this absolute piece of garbage. I don't think that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick could plan his way out of a paper bag if he had to. And I have to say, I'm trying to be optimistic about the new guy in AARO, but even the last thing where they were essentially saying that the incident over or near Eglin Air Force Base was likely related to a film balloon just it is like they are just trying to insult our intelligence, and it's just crazy. Now, do you agree sort of with my thinking that the original intent of the Pentagon and Sue Goff to deny the existence of emails or AATIP or anything like that, do you think that the long game in that was to make members of Congress and the general public that had heard about all of this doubt what Lue had said, as basically as a method to discredit Lue Elizondo?
Matt, I don't doubt that was the effect. I can't speak for the intent of the Pentagon because I'm not in their brains, but
sure.
But certainly the effect of what the Pentagon did was to try and convey to the public the notion that Lue was some kind of bullshit artist, that he'd made up this story about AATIP, and that there essentially was no credible UFO, UAP investigation program, and this was some kind of wicked invention by a bunch of deluded people who believe in paranormal, supernatural nonsense. The reality is we now know that AATIP was real, that it was concealed under another program name called ORSAP. And look, the reasons why they did all this, I think, are still blurred in history, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was a very serious intention within the ORSAP Bigelow Aerospace investigations to try to get a special access program designation for AATIP, the UFO paranormal investigations. And I think because they were seeking special access program status, there was a feeling that they didn't want to use actual known program names. They wanted to hide them behind something else because, you wanted to conceal. I think the ORSAP was the correct code name for the program, but basically it was part of a broader project. And I think Harry Reid made it categorically clear in a statement that he eventually published before he died, where he said that Lue did head the UFO investigation program, AATIP, and he tried to put it to rest. But even then, the Pentagon kept on squawking with this quite odd perception management, deliberate information mismanagement program. And I don't know why they're doing it, because it's a really dumb campaign. I don't think anybody believes them. All they've done is, it's funny, it really is, it's quite extraordinary. When you've seen, if you go back in history and you look at the history of what the Pentagon has been prepared to do, operations like Operation Northwoods, where they seriously considered running a terror attack on the American public and blaming it on the Russians or the Cubans to justify an invasion of Cuba. This is the kind of nonsense that was going on back in the early 60s with the CIA when it became a rogue organization. And that's why half a century ago, almost exactly, there was talk about the crimes of Watergate beginning to emerge in the national newspapers. And that led to what became the Church Commission, which investigated the intelligence community, particularly the abuses of the CIA, and led to very strict constraints on impropriety by the intelligence organizations inside the United States. I think 50 years on, knowing what I know and knowing what you know about the UAP issue, I think we're now at a juncture where America really needs to make a choice. Does it care about what are now obvious perception management operations, disinformation operations that are being run against the American public to try and mislead them about the UAP issue? They're being lied to. As Lue says, the American public are being treated like sheeple. It's a lovely term.
I love that.
There really is. And this is coming from a career intelligence officer. Believe me, when I first heard about Lue Elizondo, I actually spoke to people in Australian intelligence who were involved in Operation Anaconda, which is the one time where conventional forces, allied forces, have clashed with Al-Qaeda on the battlefield. We ended up in this crazy war in Afghanistan where we ended up fighting the Taliban, who really weren't the enemy. The enemy were Al-Qaeda. And the interesting thing is, Al-Qaeda, the person who was running a lot of the operations and doing a lot of the work in Kandahar in Afghanistan was Lue Elizondo under General Mattis. Now, that's why Lue's mention there of General Mattis being in the Pentagon, and the moment that he left the Pentagon, all of this disinformation occurred. Because General Mattis knew, and indeed senior Australian generals that I've spoken to knew about the work that Lue Elizondo did with both Australian Special Forces and American Special Forces in the Battle of Sharikot in Afghanistan. And it matters because of the seniority and the respect in which Elizondo was held by both my country and yours. This is not some junior little flunky. Lue is a highly respected, integral intelligence officer who's operated at the very apex of the United States intelligence community, highly respected by very senior military officers. To have somebody of his caliber speaking publicly about the possibility that, let's put it bluntly, he might be murdered is absolutely outrageous. And I can tell you, it's not the first time that I've become aware of claims that people that are speaking out on the UAP issue are feeling threats. There's going to be more on this soon. But yes, there have been threats, and there are fears that some of these threats have been acted upon. It's outrageous what's going on behind the scenes. And it's interesting because I think there's an arrogance in the Pentagon. It's not everybody in the Pentagon, by the way. There
Of
are good
course.
people in the Pentagon who are reaching out to me, people from the intelligence community who are dissociating themselves from the criminality that they're aware of. And they're actually telling me about it.
Right.
I've been swapping notes with people who have been telling me the people that they think are involved. A large part of it, by the way, is people who have a zealousness, a moral rectitude that comes from a very deep Christian evangelical belief that they're right and that the UAP phenomenon is demonic, satanic.
Even today, like I would have understood that, maybe like in the 1950s where, people went to church at a much, higher rate than they are now. But you're saying that sort of cultish thinking, that is alive and well in the Pentagon.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, you can take it to the bank. If Lue says he's being threatened, he bloody well is. And I know others who are being. And this is serious. This is a very grave situation, Matt, because we're talking at a time when there's been a complete abrogation of responsibility by the mass media. They've allowed themselves to be sheepled, to be led by the nose, to be completely and utterly convinced that this is all a BS story. And I don't know how to say it more strongly. This is real. This is an authentic national scandal happening right under our noses, where people inside the Defense Department, not everybody, but people at a very high level in the Defense Department are coordinating a deception operation on the American public. And it's not just in the Defense Department. It's across the CIA OGA office. It's through DIA. There's been a decision made that the knowledge that has been gained from NHI tech is so important that this is a national security secret that must be kept from the Congress. They can't be trusted. They're just temporary employees. We know better. That's really the attitude. This is what we're talking about here. And I find it, frankly, frightening. Your country's at a crossroads right now. It's really interesting. I speak with great respect and love for a country whose constitution I've studied in law school, and admired. There's not much point, though, in having a constitution unless you honor it. And one of the things in that constitution is military law. And insubordination in military law is perhaps the gravest offence of all. And here it is, black and white, the evidence.
It is enraging. It is enraging, and it's not like we're talking about some small infractions or maybe just a small group in the Pentagon. I mean, this kind of thing, this is extensive. I mean, this is a cancer in every sense of the word.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. And it's not just happening from the Pentagon and the intelligence community. One of the things I've started noticing is all of a sudden, whenever I make a comment on social media, it's really interesting. Just in the last 6 months or so, there's been bots, little tweet bots or commentary bots, message strings on YouTube, people I've never heard of before. I mean, one of the things I actually love about what I do and what you do is that we develop a relationship with the people that we talk to.
Right.
There's an audience out there that desperately wants this issue to be covered. And so you get to know your audience. And what I've noticed is a commonality. It's actually so comical because they're all using the same words and the same strings and phrases.
Right.
They also, one of the things that they constantly have a go at me about is, why don't I reveal the location of the large UFO? And I suspect these people are IC bots because that's actually something I've dealt with very, very clearly. These people are IC bots, intelligence community bots, Defense Department shills whose role is to cause confusion and discord amongst social media in the UAP research community. And what they don't realize is we're talking to people from the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. We're talking to people from the DIA. You guys, we know exactly who you are. I know your names. And sooner or later, we're going to name you. And you're going to be identified as people who are involved in criminal activities against the American public. And frankly, if the rest of the mainstream media doesn't cover it, I'm happy. Because frankly, there is a multi-million audience out there that is responding. I mean, I put up a an interview the other day that I did 15 years ago with Colonel Charles Holt from Rendlesham, the story of RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk in the United Kingdom. It's the audience response to that is enormous. There's another one I did with Gary Nolan that's run into the millions. And, Reality Check, where I'm doing broadcasts, is getting hundreds of thousands of views every show, some of them into the millions. People want this stuff, even if the mainstream media aren't covering it. And this is what we need to remember, is that there is a momentum there. The public are engaged and they are interested. And we've got to stop, I guess, lamenting the failure of the mainstream media and indeed the failure of oversight bodies. I've given up holding my breath, waiting for the various oversight bodies like the IGs to actually do their job and actually start heeding this stuff. Ultimately, all we can do is continue to expose what clearly seem to be blatant illegalities and criminalities being perpetrated on the American public. And it's interesting because 50 years ago, at the time of Watergate and the Church Commission, this would have been stuff that was rolling through the pages of the Washington Post and the New York Times, the LA Times, the Boston Globe, all the great newspapers of America. Sadly, all of those papers now no longer have the staff to do the kind of investigative digging work that used to be done by teams of people on these newspapers. CBS, ABC, NBC, same issue.
Right.
So now we've got a situation where there are powerful groups on social media that are doing the work. And you know what's happening? Millions of people, literally millions of people, are gravitating as an audience to see that. That matters. I can't remember the last time the great newspapers of the world got anywhere near millions of viewers. And this is the difference, Matt. The difference now is the Pentagon's trying to fight a deception war in a time of social media. They're just dinosaurs.
Right.
Because what they don't realize is they're trying to fight a deception war using analog methods in a digital world.
That's a great analogy.
That's why they're going to fail.
So you were talking about Watergate, and you had mentioned the church committee that I believe it was around 1973. And for anybody that doesn't know that history, it essentially exposed highly illegal activities that the CIA and other organizations, highly illegal activities that they had been doing unbeknownst to Congress. And as part of that, actually a little bit later after that, the Watergate investigative reporter Carl Bernstein did really pretty much a bombshell article shortly after this. I think it was in the Rolling Stone. And in his research, he had discovered that the Central Intelligence Agency during the Cold War period had employed or either compensated in a quid pro quo fashion over 400 journalists, and these were also included editors, CBS News, other outlets, 400 people that the CIA had on their payroll in some way, shape, or form to spout CIA talking points. And it seems to me from where I'm standing that that hasn't changed. It seems that that a lot of the mainstream media, they are towing the line for the Pentagon. They're carrying the water. One of the things I'm curious if you had heard the same, that right before the AARO historical report, that the Pentagon had cut a deal in a way with a backroom deal with reporters that would just parrot the Pentagon talking points. So Julian Barnes of the New York Times and others. But what they also did is they froze out people like yourself and News Nation. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if they cut a deal with Barnes. I'm not suggesting for a moment that Barnes is wittingly involved in some kind of contractual deal with the Defense Department. But what all of those national security journalists and defense journalists are constrained by is a journalist is only ever as good as their sources. And one of the things I've had the experience of doing is I've offended at times institutions that I've been reliant on for information and stories, and they've cut me off. They closed the tap. And
Wow.
there comes a time as a journalist where you've really got to stay honorable and go, well, I'm sorry, you've done something wrong. I've exposed the impropriety. If you cut me off, so be it. But you've
Yeah.
still got to stick to your principles. You can't allow yourself as a journalist to be manipulated by the party that you're telling the story about. And one of the problems, and I don't want to speak ill broadly of all journalists, because there are some fabulous investigative stories still being done in mainstream media, albeit they are being strangled by budget cuts and staff cuts. I mean, barely a day goes by at the moment where institutional mainstream media networks aren't cutting people, laying off people. It's happening all the time. And this is happening because of the slow encroachment, which I think is a good thing, of social media. We've got the Googles, the Meta Facebooks, we've got the Instagrams, TikToks, and
Right.
Twitters. And I like the fact, personally, I take a somewhat libertarian view on this. I think it's inevitable that sooner or later we'll be putting a stake through the heart of establishment media, because they've become lazy, stale, pompous, and far too beholden to the people that feed them. And I won't name names, but basically I see it all the time. I see people who run stories that are negative about the UAP issue, and then within a few days, they're running some story leaked from the Ukraine, which is an exclusive insight clearly derived from DIA intelligence or CIA intelligence, and they're given a drop. And that's the way it works. I've had people. I remember once I sat down with a very senior policeman in the country, in this country, and we were investigating chronic illegality by his police force.
Mhm.
And he offered me, in front of one of his staff, what was effectively a bribe. It was
Wow.
a whole series of stories that, if I'd taken the bait and agreed not to do the story that I was doing, then he would basically feed me a whole series of stories and I'd be on the drip. And that's the way it works. I didn't take the offer. And sure enough, I got lambasted. They tried to crucify me in the Australian media. In the end, we won. But one of the problems is, in order to do that kind of work as a media person, you need a huge institutional mainstream media organisation behind you to cover your back. You need lawyers. It's tough holding the line with a government agency that can spend unlimited amounts of money on lawyers, PR people, disinformation operations. And one of the other things that I'm seeing, Matt, at the moment is I've got people calling me who are telling me that stuff they've posted on places like Reddit is mysteriously disappearing. Now, I don't know how it works. I don't know how this works, but one of the things that I am aware of is that there are government agencies that are doing what's called Google ranking attacks. And
Okay.
so if there's an article they don't like, they can actually reduce the significance of that article using their algorithms and basically make it disappear. You won't find it in the first 1,000 pages of your Google search. So what they do is they lower the ranking of those articles. And one of the things I got leaked recently is the names of people working in Meta, Facebook, and Google. And I haven't publicized this yet, but I'll tell you about it. There are people formerly working in perception operations in the CIA and the intelligence community who are now working inside social media organizations. I've got
Wow.
those. I've got those people's CVs. I know who they are. And I'm just waiting to see eventually when we can use it. I know a lot more than I'm able to discuss publicly
Of
because I
course.
know how these organizations play. They're using perception management, disinformation, exactly as they did right back in 1974, 75, 76, when Nixon was trying to put out the fires of Watergate. What we are seeing here, Matt, is the slow burning embers of a national scandal. And sooner or later, it's going to come out into the open. And what's happening at the moment is there are people behind the scenes who are coming forward. And I get kind of bored, really, with people in the UAP, UFO community who treat this as entertainment. They get angry. They say, why is my weekly serve of new information about UAP stuff not coming up on my plate? And what they don't understand is the level of work and investigation that has to be done to crack this stuff without compromising sources. And believe me, that work is being done right now. There are more people coming forward, quietly providing people like me and congressional oversight committees information about blatant criminality and illegality involving the program. And it's going to come out. Mark my words.
It is absolutely going to come out, and names, as you mentioned, are going to come out. But Congress, they have to step up to the plate and do something about this. This is about their constitutional duty of oversight, and they're clearly.
I literally had a conversation yesterday with a source who's agonizing about talking to Congress. And one of the things that I think is still on the books in Congress, and I was really heartened to see Ask a Poll did a great interview the other day with a politician who talked about their desire to still try and get the Schumer legislation up in some form. This whistleblower protection legislation is absolutely vital for Congress to do its job properly. They're not going to be able to persuade whistleblowers to come forward unless those whistleblowers can feel assured that they're being protected. It's all very well politicians saying, come and have a quiet chat with me in my office on the Hill. The mere act of doing that, these people are watched so closely, they know they'll be compromised. There's really, I think, there's a great quote, those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. Isn't it ironic that 50 years on from the crimes revealed by the Church Commission, what we're talking about here are deception operations being run criminally against the American public, exactly the same stuff that brought down Nixon. It's amazing. And we've got the same problem with paralysis and lack of oversight. Paralysis in the media and lack of oversight by a lot of the agencies that are meant to be doing their job. And the only way this is going to be revealed is by digging, careful investigation and careful expose. And that's why what you've revealed today is so important.
And one thing I'd like to point out as well is David Grusch has also stated, and I believe he did this, if I'm correct, during his congressional testimony, that there have been physical threats, including, well, I don't know if he said what works or not, but this is nothing new. This goes back, for quite some time, this level of intimidation, correct?
All of my sources go everywhere armed. They take counterintelligence actions to make sure that they're protected. You can read into that what you will, but people are prepared for the probability that somebody is going to try and take a shot at them. That's what we're talking about here.
Folks in Congress, I hope you're listening to this. This cannot stand. This is just absolutely. It's illegal, and it's just morally wrong on every level. So speaking of whistleblowers, one thing I've often wondered. We saw after Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's departure from AARO, this kind of sort of media rehabilitation tour, where I thought it was just so incredibly odd that just out of the blue, he seems to be parroting what the debunkers had been saying, people like Mick West, or more specifically Stephen Greenstreet, that members of Congress have been hoodwinked into believing all of this stuff. Do you think that, in your personal opinion, of course, we don't know, really what occurred. Do you think that Kirkpatrick has been part of this kind of targeted disinformation with the purpose of discouraging whistleblowers from going to AARO? In other words, he kind of poisoned the well on purpose?
Look, I don't know what his intent was, because I don't know what's going on inside his head. But again, it's the effect of what he did. Right. He's perhaps been an unwitting tool, a fool who's been misused by people who are misinforming him. I do find that very hard to believe, though. I mean, some of the things he's just said are frankly outrageous. I mean, he's been caught out on what are completely untrue statements in the last few days. I think it's been frankly embarrassing for Dr. Kirkpatrick to be sticking his head up and running what is a clear campaign, a disinformation campaign. And I take you back to when Kirkpatrick appeared publicly a few months ago. Wasn't it interesting that trotting along behind him very, very closely, listening to every word, guess who? Oh, Susan Gough.
Yeah.
The Pentagon's PR woman, disinformation, deception operation expert.
Well, as I pointed out in her LinkedIn profile, I had initially, and that was the first time I had looked at it, I thought that she was strictly just a spokesperson, but she listed it right there. She is part of the strategy making team. To me, that indicates if she is the one making these kinds of calls, I would guess that she has been read into probably almost all of this whole thing, and and I can't imagine that is part of her normal job to chase Sean Kirkpatrick around at all these different events and literally manage the guy. It seems a little bit odd.
Yeah, well, I'll read you, there's a job ad here I'm just looking at the moment. It was an ad placed in January this year. It's now been filled. And it was the euphemistically titled Senior Action Officer for DOD. So it didn't say what department this person would be working in. Essentially, they had to have an active top secret clearance with eligibility to be doing compartmentalized work. So this is a pretty high clearance job.
Right.
And what was one of the requirements of the job? Develop and coordinate packages that include time-sensitive requirements for leadership to enable DoD influence, deception, and perception management related operations, activities, and investments. And the interesting thing is the company that was being hired to do this work, they were the person retaining this senior action officer, is Sancorp, Sancorp.
Okay.
Now, it was a well-paid job, and it was for obviously somebody with a very high security clearance, wanting them to run deception operations. And guess where Sancorp works, Matt?
You tell.
They work for AARO. They are the people that you referred to earlier who are on a multi-million-dollar retainer to provide services for AARO, the Pentagon's UAP UFO investigation office. Now, I don't know whether this specific job that requires or mandates deception operations is part of the AARO shtick. I sincerely hope not, because for what it's worth, mate, I've spoken to two people in AARO other than Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and they are good people. They are very determined to try and get to the bottom of this UAP mystery. And frankly, they're embarrassed by what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was spinning in the last few months. They are genuine about getting to the bottom of this mystery. And I think they're kind of frustrated and somewhat pissed off that, their leadership went off reservation and acted in an impetuous way, going around telling the public things that are demonstrably not accurate.
Of course. What are you hearing from your sources in Congress regarding the entire subject?
Congress is distracted by the election right now. There is an impatience amongst congressional staffers for all of the witnesses to come forward as quickly as possible. I'm heartened because I've had meetings and conversations with senior senators, very senior senators, who have reassured me that they are determined to get to the bottom of this matter and they know Congress is being misled. I think the reality is that in any election year, after about June, July, it's a bit of a waste of time trying to talk to politicians about anything other than getting themselves elected. That's really what it's all about. So I think we're going to lose momentum for much of this year. And I think whoever becomes president in November, it's going to be a very interesting period. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see, because there are other revelations that may come to light between now and then. But it would be nice, wouldn't it, if UAPs was to become a significant election issue?
That would be great. Have you heard from any of your sources as to whether President Joe Biden has been briefed on the UAP issue?
That's a really good question. I don't know for sure. What I have heard is that Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, took an extremely close interest and participated in at least one or two of the hearings on the Hill by the Senate Select Committee for Intelligence. I've also heard that more recently he's been quite obstructive to the issue, that he doesn't want the president distracted by the UAP issue in the run-up to the election, which, to be brutally honest with you, is what I would be doing if I was his national security advisor. I mean, you've got wars on just about every hemisphere on the planet right now. You've got the awful possibility as we move F-22s on an island, only a few miles off the Chinese mainland. We've got the awful possibility that we could see a conflict with China this year, perhaps, which is just unthinkable that it might even possibly go nuclear. You've got mounting escalation with Russia. You've got misery in the Middle East. I think Biden, frankly, has got enough on his plate. And if I was his national security advisor, I'd be doing what Jake Sullivan's doing. But I do know Sullivan's interested, and I think they do realize they've been lied to. I know that they're aware that they've been lied to. And I know that there's been representations made by people like John Podesta to the Biden White House. John Podesta, of course, having been under the Clinton and Obama administrations, very prominent in speaking out on the issue of UAPs. But it's very hard to gauge because they're keeping their cards very close to their chest. I get the sense that, for the moment at least, the Biden White House is distracted by the imperative of getting the boss reelected.
Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case. Last couple of questions. Do you think that we will see a Schumer UAP Disclosure Amendment 2.0?
Yeah, I do.
That's great. We definitely want that. And finally, do you, especially in light of what Lue Elizondo had to say today, do you expect any whistleblowers to come forward in a public way?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I certainly do. I think that is something that we absolutely need. Well, Ross, thank you for joining us. How can firstly, what are you up to next? You have a great new show on News Nation.
Yeah, we're doing. I do a show called Reality Check on News Nation, which I think goes out every week at the moment. And I also do the Need to Know podcast still with my good friend and colleague, Bryce Zabel. And I'm speaking at SCU. I'm coming to America to speak at the Scientific Coalition for the Studies of UAPs at Huntsville, Alabama, in a couple of weeks. And I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of the people in the UAP scientific field there. A lot on my plate right now.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Well, Ross, my hat is off to you. You have definitely been a hero to me. I've told many people this story when I went to the Seoul conference, and the first morning there, I had coffee with you. I've worked in Hollywood for over 25 years, and I don't get starstruck. But sitting having coffee with you, that was the first time I actually felt starstruck in a long time.
That's one thing I give America a big fail on, frankly, Matt, is American coffee. We've got to talk about that another
day. we definitely will. Well, Ross, my hat is off to you. And I have to say also to News Nation as well, you and News Nation are doing the hard, serious journalistic work that everybody else should be doing, but they are just absolutely asleep at the wheel with a few exceptions such as Chris Sharp and Mark von Rennenkamp. But man, you are just absolutely killing it, and I can say my country certainly owes a debt of gratitude to your efforts and for News Nation for having the courage to confront this whole thing head on.
Thank you, Matt.
Awesome. Great. All right, Ross Coulthart, ladies and gentlemen. All right, great. Well, that was just fantastic. I absolutely love Ross. He is in many ways, I consider him a role model. I don't consider myself a journalist. I'm more kind of like a talk show host that's interested in this topic. One thing that I would like to point out that Ross brought up earlier in terms of the information and perception management companies. So these IPM companies exist. They are there to manage the information and perception management for the Department of Defense. Now, you would think that really kind of their whole job is to, let's say, target foreign adversaries with social media posts that promote American interests. But the fact of the matter is that no law in terms of IPM contractors, that is how I understand it, because they are a separate entity. They are not they are not a wing of the Department of Defense. That there is nothing prohibiting them from engaging in information and perception management operations on the American electorate. I don't know for sure if that's true, but one thing that I would like to point out as well, the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, which was, by the way, the office that Lue Elizondo worked for, and by the way, was the office that engaged in criminal targeted behavior of Lue Elizondo, going after his security clearance. If you go and you dig into that, there is quite a history of that. The person that ran OUSDINS, at least under the Biden administration, was Ronald Moultrie, who, oh, by the way, was on the advisory board of Battelle Memorial Institute, which runs Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Battelle Memorial Institute has a history in this UAP topic. So you have Ronald Moultrie that was on the advisory board of Battelle. It was actually on his LinkedIn post, and I think simultaneously Ross and I broke the news that he was in charge or on the advisory board of Battelle Memorial Institute prior to going into the Office of Undersecretary of Defense. And guess what? All of a sudden, Moultrie had that whole thing scrubbed from his LinkedIn and any other social media posts. But one of the important things to note here, when AARO was formed, the OUSDINS, Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, which was run by Ronald Moultrie at the time, that is the office that AARO was initially under. So, stop and think about that. And, we had mentioned a while back, I think, that our sources had indicated that Ronald Moultrie, who testified in front of that first very congressional hearing, House of Representatives, I don't recall the exact committee, but it was Ronald Moultrie and from the Navy, Bray. I'm blanking on his first name, but Ronald Moultrie, we're told from multiple sources that he refused to be briefed on the UAP issue prior to sitting in front of Congress, and I don't believe it was under oath, but prior to sitting in front of Congress, Moultrie refused to be briefed on the UAP issue. He only wanted to be briefed after he was finished testifying to Congress. Now, if I don't know if that doesn't scream a method of being able to have plausible deniability, I don't know what does. Secondly, information and perception management corporations. Guess who is in charge of all of that? The Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. So you have OUSDINS who engaged in criminal targeted behavior of Lue Elizondo. This is the same outfit that is running this, is managing the information and perception management operations for the United States of America. Stop and think about that. And stop and think about the fact that you have Sue Go, who works as the Pentagon's she is the nexus at the Pentagon for absolutely anything related to the UFO UAP topic. It doesn't matter if it's FOIA, it doesn't matter if it's press requests. This is the lady that's running it. This is the lady who did psychological operations for the Army prior to going into Booz Hamilton. And, that's yet another giant defense contractor, and God knows what she was doing for them. But when you step and when you just back out and look at all of this from a 50,000-foot point of view, 50,000-foot altitude, you see a clear, coordinated effort on behalf of the Pentagon and the CIA to spin narratives to disparage David Grusch, to disparage Lue Elizondo, to in my opinion, coordinate with members of the debunker community, possibly people like Mick West and Stephen Greenstreet, who is, well, I don't even want to go into what I think about that guy. But when you step back and you look at all of these different streams of information from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, from Stephen Greenstreet at New York Post, from Mick West on his different outlets, you look at all of the messaging that has come out of that, and then you look at the messaging that has been emanating from former director of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. It is crystal clear all of this is a coordinated effort to convince the American public that all of this, all of the efforts on Congress to investigate all of this and pass legislation related to UFOs and UAPs, that all of this, in my opinion, is a global, a global in the sense of the United States government and the CIA and the Pentagon, a global effort on their part to convince the American electorate that this is a waste of money. And as soon as the American taxpayer comes to the conclusion or is told by all these different outlets that all of this is a waste of time and money, what are they going to do? They are going to contact their elected representatives and say, hey, what are you guys spending all this money on the UAP UFO issue on? I hear it's a bunch of bunk. But what is a bunch of bunk is the fact that this is even going on and that the Pentagon and the CIA continue to try and hoodwink Congress. It is almost as if they think we are living back in the 1950s where absolutely anything that the United States government would say, the American public would fall in lockstep and say, you know what, if Uncle Sam told me it's true, then it must be true. But we are at a different point in our history. And as Ross Coulthart very accurately pointed out, people no longer take at face value what the government tells them. They no longer take at face value what the New York Times, what the Washington Post tells them. You have people like Ross Coulthart on News Nation. You have people like Christopher Sharp running the Liberation Times. You have Merrick von Rennenkamp doing good work at The Hill. These are the people that are actually doing the hard journalistic work. They are the ones not afraid to buck the system. Ross Coulthart spoke about having journalistic integrity, where he does the right thing. He is going to do his damn job rather than have the Pentagon or somebody else hold something over him so that he just parrots whatever the Pentagon wants him to. This guy, Ross Coulthart, actually has journalistic integrity, which sadly is something in the United States of America has just seemingly gone by the wayside. And again, going back to Congress, you are in, members of Congress, you are in there because we, the American people, have put you there. We have elected you to do a job, to legislate. And when you've got a Pentagon and the Central Intelligence Agency that is bypassing all of you in Congress, bypassing the staffers in Congress, bypassing reading in the President of the United States as to what is going on, How can we as the American people expect our legislators to actually legislate and make the right decisions for this country? It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. This has nothing to do with party. This has to do with a Pentagon and a CIA that behaves as if we live in a damn military junta. That is not what our founding fathers intended. How can you expect the President of the United States, it doesn't matter who it is, Democrat or Republican, how can you expect the President of the United States to execute foreign policy on our behalf if he doesn't know about all of this? It would be as if somebody or the Pentagon or the CIA decided, you know what, the president doesn't need to know about Russia, and the president doesn't need to know that Russia is a national security threat with all of these nuclear weapons. The analogy is exactly the same, because that is exactly what the Pentagon and the CIA have decided for all of us that are watching this, that they do not deserve to know. I cannot think of anything more un-American, anything more undemocratic than a Pentagon and a CIA who is willing to literally throw people under the bus that have given everything for this country. Men and women that have sacrificed, that have put country before self, country before family. People such as Lue Elizondo and David Grusch that have looked and said, you know what? This is not what America stands for. They put themselves, they put their families at risk to speak up. A lot of people say, or you'll hear the debunkers say, oh, Lue Elizondo and David Grusch, they're all into it for the money. Give me a damn break. These folks, they actually just have the balls to do what is right because they know what is going on is illegal and it flies in the face of the Constitution. And members of Congress, you owe it to your oath to this country to pursue this. When you have the Pentagon and the CIA using cutouts, Blackwater's private security contractors to go and harass and intimidate government whistleblowers? Back in November, Chris Sharp, Josh Boswell, and myself wrote what I would consider a bombshell article for the Daily Mail detailing how the CIA and its Office of Global Access, which is a super secretive organization within the Directorate of Science and Technology in the CIA, had been illegally running, or has been illegally running, a crash retrieval and UFO crash retrieval and back engineering operation for literally decades, hiding it from Congress and members of the executive branch. We detailed how the CIA and its Office of Global Access has in place a system that is, I'm guessing, part of the National Geospatial Agency, has a intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capability to detect when UAPs go down. And what do? They task recovery operations. They task it to Joint Special Operations Command, and then half of them they task to private contractors. The Boeings of the world, the Lockheed Martins of the world, who employ private security contractors such as Blackwater and others. These security contractors have former Tier 1 operators such as Navy SEALs. And they have the assets and the capabilities to go into both friendly countries and denied areas to go and recover this stuff. One of the things we weren't able to determine is how the decisions are made, how the Office of Global Access and the CIA determines what is going to be picked up by the American government with JSOC, or what was going to be handed off to the private aerospace corporations. But here's the thing. You have to ask yourself, who is watching over any of that decision making? The answer is nobody. Congress isn't doing it because they're hiding it from them. They are lying. The CIA and the Pentagon are bold-faced lying to Congress. They're doing everything they can to whisper in the ears of staffers and congressmen and women and senators that there's nothing to see here. This is all bunk. You guys have been hoodwinked by a bunch of UFO religious zealots that just happen to have held some of the nation's highest security clearances, that happen to be some of the most vetted people that have worked in our national security establishment. Their whole goal is to put this genie back in the bottle because they don't want you, the American people, to understand what has been going on for decades, literally decades. Because if I were the average American citizen and I understood that the Pentagon and the CIA, they were doing their own thing and not giving a damn about what the American voter thinks, I would be mad as hell. And members of Congress, you should be mad as hell. This is an existential threat to democracy in the United States of America. This has been going on for far too long. And as Lue Elizondo, brought to everyone's attention in these statements that he provided to us at the Good Troubleshow, it is clear the Pentagon and the CIA, they are getting desperate. They know that they have committed criminal acts, felonies. So they are desperate, and they are doing everything they can to shut people up. And that includes retaliation against people, against potential whistleblowers. When we are at the point in our country where the Pentagon and the CIA is threatening to kill people for speaking up and doing the right thing, that is not a democracy. It is a perversion of democracy. And frankly, if it doesn't get fixed, we are all in we are in a lot of trouble. So for those of you that are watching this at home, asking, what can I do? Firstly, I would say this is an absolute team effort. It's not about one person's talk show or one person's publication. This is a team effort for all of us to stand up and say, we are not going to take this any longer. You can get on the phone, write an email to your congressional representative and let them know it is not okay to have the CIA and the Pentagon threaten our men and women who have worn the uniform. I can't think of anything more un-American. And you absolutely, I can't even begin to understand what goes through the people in goes through the heads of the people in the Pentagon and the CIA that think this kind of behavior is all right. What kind of moral compass do they have? I can tell you there is no moral compass. The absolute arrogance that they don't need to tell Congress or the president, or for that matter, likely the vice president, of what has been going on and the illegality that has been going on. Now, as Ross pointed out, there are good people in these organizations. None of these organizations are monolithic. There are people in there that are trying to do the right thing in the CIA, in the Pentagon, in the intelligence community writ large. But you've had this cancer that has been a part of this for a very long time. You've had a group of 50-ish or so senior executive service level people that for decades have come and gone that have managed this entire portfolio. They are the gatekeepers. These are people that have cut backroom deals and made decisions on behalf of the American people that we have no idea what kind of allegiances, what kind of agreements they've made. We can't know because there is no oversight. They hide it from Congress. So you have to ask yourself, when is enough enough? When do we as Americans stand up and say it is not all right for our Pentagon and intelligence community to threaten the lives of people that have worn the uniform, people that have decided what they see is not right at absolutely any level? And members of Congress, it's easy to take the easy road. It's easy for members of Congress and staffers to just look the other way. I understand that. This is a difficult topic. Luckily, we've had people like Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and Marco Rubio, Congressman Tim Burchett, Matt Gaetz, and others, people that I may not necessarily politically agree with, but they have had the balls to speak up and do the right thing and stand up to the Pentagon and the CIA because they know they have been lied to. I can tell you that members in the Senate have seen classified intelligence product, people, senators and their staffers that are cleared to see intelligence product. They know damn well what is going on. They know things are coming in and out of our atmosphere that are not from here, and they are not from China, and they are not from Russia. They are well aware. And certain members of Congress are well aware that the Pentagon and the CIA has been lying to them. They are well aware that the CIA and the Pentagon and other stakeholders have engaged in illegal activity, felonies that would land absolutely anyone in jail for a very long time. I've also said, too, to the good people in AARO, to the good people in the CIA, to the good people in the Pentagon, now is the time. I think all of you in the government that feel it's time, or maybe those that don't think it's time, to understand that the path to reconciliation with the American public will be a far easier path if you tackle this now. If the Pentagon and the CIA chooses to keep doing the same thing, lying to Congress, lying to presidents, lying to the American people, and intimidating government whistleblowers, you've got another thing coming. And reconciliation will not be good. So do the right thing. It's better to pull off the Band-Aid, level with the American people. None of us that have been advocating, or those of us that talk to people on Capitol Hill, we are not telling them, look, the Pentagon needs to dump absolutely everything, including national security secrets or what we have is stuffed in some warehouse. All of us love our country. We want to see our government do the right thing. And the sooner those of you in the Pentagon and the CIA and other elements of the government decide to do the right thing, including the 50-ish or so gatekeepers that have been managing this thing, imagine all of the stress of having to continually lie about this. As my mom once told me, it's not the lie, it's the cover-up and the continued lies that that they have to continually pursue and cover your tracks to cover the original sin. So folks, reach out to your elected representatives. Tell them what you heard tonight. Tell them that you know damn well what is going on. We are not a bunch of sheeple. This is the United States of America, and the Pentagon and the CIA need to act like it is.